Is history a linear process? Certain people do believe so.
The end of history refers to whether that evolution, finally culminates in the last civilization that mankind will achieve.
And certain people believe they are the last form of human civilization.
We, the people, are the true heirs of the American experiment.
For far too long, there are always those who try to equate modernization with Westernization. But is that the case? Are we really at a linear end to history? China believes otherwise.
历史没有终结，也不可能被终结。
The Communist Party of China announced to the world that there is a Chinese path to modernization, and this path has created a new form of human advancement. Well, what does it mean to take a Chinese path to modernization? And will it pose an ultimate challenge to the thesis of end of history? To put in perspective, I asked Lawrence Bram to join the discussion. He's an American China watcher who has spent over 30 years in China, and he's an active individual participant amid the country's decades of reform and opening up. Hey Lawrence, how's it going?
Hi, how are you doing? Pleasure to see you today.
Lawrence will help me further expand on the idea of Chinese modernization and its profound implications. Okay, so I see that the Communist Party of China has now formally promulgated the idea Chinese path to modernization. What profound meaning do you think this move contains?
Well, I think that right now China's evolved its own model of economic development. It's based on trying to take the best things that work and to make those things work for China within China's context, which is different from other countries. And if it's relevant to you, adopt it. If it's not relevant, you don't adopt it. There's no single model. There's no single answer to anything.
China has found its own answer, but now without trials and errors. In 1840, China was forced open by Western gunboats, and what was later known to be the century of humiliation began. The nation and its people embarked on the quest for renewal through modernization, though the journey turned out twisty and protracted. It was not until the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949 that the country finally got on the right track. And since the launch of reform and opening up in 1978, especially the new breakthroughs made in the past 10 years, China succeeded in advancing and expanding Chinese modernization. So it has been contended by some people that the Western model should be the only legitimate pattern for a country to develop. So do you think there should be only one fixed formula, like the Western model, for a country to develop or to achieve modernization?
And I think most of the world is realized that you have to have diverse models or diverse approaches, and each approach to economic development really needs to look at the individual needs of that country. We live in a planet of enormous diversity.
In today's world, however, the tolerance for that kind of diversity is dwindling.
No country presents a broader, more severe threat to our ideas, our innovation, our economic security than China.
A country that doesn't share Western values often invites sanctions, isolation, and sometimes invasion. Sticking to its own path takes courage and dedication. China is working to achieve modernization for its 1.4 billion people, a number larger than the combined population of all developed countries in the world today. This is a task of unparalleled difficulty. But China has managed the unimaginable. Over the past decade, China's gross national income per capita doubled. China now accounts for nearly 1/5 of the global economy, and China becomes the biggest trading partner of over 120 countries and regions. The road to these achievements now has the definition, Chinese path to modernization. So China is the only country recognized by the United Nations as having a complete industrial system. So with all these achievements, why do you think China still keeps on pursuing its own kind of modernization?
So you had, of course, in the early years of China's economic development, the priority was to get, out of the starting blocks, to move forward. However, this ended up creating enormous pressures. You had overdevelopment, really, in the coastal areas, and you had underdevelopment in certain interior regions. China's leaders have sat back and said, no, we're going to have a much more equal, balanced economy. What you've seen in the Western countries, in the United States and Europe in particular, is a bottoming out of the middle class. The middle class doesn't exist. You now have either your super elite and you have your poor.
I do believe in the American dream.
American dreams are worth fighting for.
The American dream is back.
Despite a penchant for the idea of equal opportunity, the inequality of outcomes is growing in America. In 1976, the richest 1% possessed 8% of total national wealth. Today, they control 32% of national income. The gap is widening. Imbalance and inequality is not exclusive to one country, but the approaches to address the problem vary. 10 years ago, although China just became the world's second biggest economy, there were still nearly 100 million people living under the poverty line. Today, penury became history, and China is shooting for an even more challenging goal: common prosperity for all. This concept is also enshrined as one of the 5 key features of Chinese modernization. China is also targeting at a balance between material abundance and cultural ethical enrichment, and the harmony between humanity and nature. What do you think Chinese modernization or Chinese path to modernization means to a wider audience in the rest of the world?
Well, I think that much of the developing world has observed China's experience over these decades and has observed very carefully how China has either adapted policies from other countries or not, and has evolved its own policies. Many of the developing countries in Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Central and South America, particularly Central and South America, have been hit hardest with a lot of the American models of development, which have not really worked. They've looked at the China model or the China approach to development.
Modernization in many Western countries used to be powered by war, colonization, and plunder. Today, this bloodstained path can no longer be copied by developing nations. They are facing a steeper hill to climb. To catch up with the developed world, many countries of the global south need to achieve 2 modernizations all at once. That is, to promote an industrialized economy and to build an intellectual society. To make such a leapfrog entails thinking outside the box.
What China has proven is that you don't have to follow the Western model, that the success of China's modernization, industrial growth, social economic prosperity has been a feature of it taking its own path.
But we can learn from our Chinese friends with the measures that they are putting in place concretely to address the development of their people.
This unique experience of China is a role model for the rest of the world to emulate.
History has not ended, nor is it a linear process. History is written in a world of diversity, where advancement can be achieved through various paths, and Chinese path to modernization is one of them. It shows to the world one ironclad truth: a nation's destiny is the making of its own.